You've had this conversation before. Not once, not twice, but enough times that you can feel it starting before it even begins. Maybe it's the tone, maybe it's the timing, maybe it's something in your body that goes quiet and braces just slightly as you think, oh, this again. And part of you still believes this time might go differently, that if you say it more clearly or more calmly or from a better angle, something will finally click. It won't, not today, and not like this. You're listening to Coupled With, the podcast that helps you take the guesswork out of feeling seen, heard, and valued in your relationship. If you've ever felt stuck in the same arguments, struggled to stay connected, or wondered how to better communicate with your partner, you're in the right place. I'm Dr. Rachel Orlick, a couples therapist and coach, and together, we're going to make relationships make sense. Let's dive in. What usually happens is almost eerily predictable. You bring it up, they react in a way that's familiar, you feel the shift, you try to adjust. Maybe you explain more, your tone sharpens, you start pulling back, and somehow the whole thing slides into the exact same shape it always does. Same conversation, different day, same frustration, same distance. And that's the part that starts to feel a little crazy making. Because it's not like you haven't tried. You have, from different angles and moods and different levels of patience. Softer, more direct, more prepared. And it keeps landing in the same place, which eventually creates this quiet, creeping belief. Either you're not explaining it well enough, or they're just not willing to hear it. But here's what's worth considering. What if neither of those is actually the problem? What if the issue isn't the words at all, but something that's already in the room before either of you says anything? That's where we're going today. It usually starts with something reasonable. You bring it up, something that genuinely matters, something you've thought about, something you've probably tried to approach more than once. You're not coming in swinging. You are coming in trying, and within a few minutes, or sometimes a few sentences, you can feel it happening. The thing you were hoping wouldn't happen. They get defensive, or go quiet, or say something that misses the point entirely. Perhaps it's your own tone that shifts. You hear it happening and can't quite stop it. A little more edge than you meant. A little less patience than you had when you started. And then you're in it. The version of this you've been in before. You start explaining more because you can feel that it's not landing, and they start defending more, or they start shutting down because they can feel that the pressure is building. You try to get through to them. They try to get out from under the weight of it. And what started as a conversation about something real has quietly become something else. A demonstration that this conversation doesn't go well. What makes this particular pattern so exhausting is that it carries its own verdict. Every time it repeats, it adds more data points to a conclusion that both of you are slowly, reluctantly building. This is just what happens when we try to talk about this. And once that conclusion starts feeling true, something shifts in how you both show up before the conversation even begins. You brace a little, they brace a little. The conversation hasn't started yet, and both of you are already somewhere in the middle of the last one. That's not a communication problem. That's a pattern that has learned to run itself. The reason why this is so hard to see from inside the loop is that the problem looks like clarity. It really does feel like if I could just explain this better, they would finally get it. So you try again. New wording, better examples, more patience, different timing. And each attempt genuinely feels like a fresh approach. And each one ends in the same place, which makes the loop feel personal. like you're failing at something you should be able to do. But the reframe is, when something ends the same way this consistently, content is rarely the issue. What's organizing the moment isn't what's being said. It's the state both of you are already in when you're starting to say it. You might be coming in already braced, a low-level tension that says, I really hope this goes differently, but I don't trust that it will. And your partner may be coming in with their own version of that. I already feel like I'm about to get this wrong. And before either of you have said anything, your systems have already made a prediction about what's about to happen. And those predictions start shaping everything. Your tone, the pacing, what you're listening for, how you react, and what you miss in that conversation entirely. Technically, you're talking about something current, but your bodies are not treating it like a new moment. They're treating it like a familiar one that has gone sideways many times before. And repetition on its own doesn't create change. It deepens the groove you're already in. So by the time you're having the conversation, your systems are already halfway into that pattern. You're not entering as two blank slates. You're entering with memory, and not just the mental kind, but body memory, emotional memory, the kind that registers tone before words, facial expression before content, and micro pauses before meaning. So when a conversation has gone badly before, your system is already reading the next version of it before the current one has even found its footing. It's scanning and bracing, and it's trying to stay ahead of what it already believes is coming. That's the part of why these loops move so fast. It's just one sentence, one tone, one look, and suddenly neither of you is fully in the conversation anymore. You're in all the conversations that have ever felt like this one all at once. Your body goes, I know this scene, and everything accelerates from there. What that looks like from the outside is one person explaining harder because they feel like dismissal is impending. The other will shut down or deflect because they're already anticipating being overwhelmed. Neither of those responses are irrational. They are both forms of protection. The explainer is trying to get through before the window closes, and the one who shuts down is trying to regulate before things escalate even further. Both systems are doing their jobs, and both systems, in that moment, make connection harder. This is why repetition alone doesn't lead to repair. If the same nervous system state keeps showing up, you're not actually creating a new experience. You're rehearsing a familiar one. You might have different words, but the same bracing, the same internal predictions, and the same quiet dread. That's not a new conversation. That's the old one wearing slightly different clothing. The issue is not what you're saying. It's the state that you say it from. Let me pause here for a moment, because if you're listening to this podcast and thinking, why do I spiral like this in relationships? You're not the only one. A lot of thoughtful, emotionally responsible people find themselves lying awake replaying arguments, trying to hold the relationship together, and quietly wondering if their needs are somehow too much. I created a free 10-minute training called Why Love Feels Like Too Much, where I walk through what's actually happening underneath those moments. We talk about the hidden cycle couples get pulled into, why your nervous system reacts so strongly when connection feels uncertain, and a simple 3-question reset you can use when you feel the spiral starting. If that would be helpful for you, you can find the link to it in the show notes. All right, so coming back, if this keeps happening, these conversations, then the instinct is to try harder, more explaining and effort and better wording. And that instinct makes complete sense. Of course, you want to find the version that finally lands. But if the underlying state hasn't changed, more talking usually just produces a longer version of the same story. Here's the contrast that's worth sitting with. There's a difference between a conversation that's hard because it's genuinely difficult and a conversation that's hard because the conditions for it to land aren't actually present. The first kind is worth pushing through. The second kind, the one where both people are already bracing and predicting the outcome, that one doesn't get better with more precision. It gets better when something interrupts the state itself. Because clarity doesn't land well in a body that's already defending against whatever's coming. Insight doesn't move much if it already arrives in a nervous system that's prepared for threat. You can be more articulate, more thoughtful, and more prepared, and still end up in the exact same place. Not because you're doing something wrong, because the conversation isn't failing due to lack of important content. It's failing because the container that the content is in has already collapsed. Recognizing that isn't resignation. It's actually the first accurate read of what's happening. So if the problem isn't just the topic, what actually helps? Not a full reset, not a perfectly regulated conversation where both of you arrive as enlightened forest creatures with excellent boundaries and impeccable timing. Usually it starts with something much smaller, noticing the loop while you're inside it, and naming that you're in it before you keep feeding it. Because the most automatic thing in these moments is to keep going. Keep explaining, keep pushing, keep reaching for the version of the conversation that might finally work if you just muscle through it hard enough. But when the shape of the pattern is already recognizable, when you can feel that you're no longer in that new moment, you're in a familiar one, more effort usually means a deeper rut. The shift might sound like, I don't think this is going differently right now. Can we come back to this? Not a door slam, not abandoning the topic, just a simple naming that the pattern is already in the room. What that does is interrupt the trance. It makes visible the thing that has been running invisibly, which is the first genuinely different thing that has happened in that interaction. And sometimes that small bit of awareness, offered without blame or resignation, is enough to step outside of the script instead of finishing it yet again. This is not avoidance. The topic still matters. You're still protecting it, not dropping it. Because what often happens when you push through a conversation that's already going sideways, it's not resolution. It's reinforcement. One more run of the same loop, or one more data point for the conclusion that both of you are quietly building. The skill of recognizing the pattern and pausing it without it becoming a weapon or an exit is something most people have to practice a lot before it becomes available in the moment. That practice is worth doing. It usually doesn't happen from insight alone. The frustration in these moments makes complete sense. You are not bringing things up for fun. You are bringing them up because they matter, because something in your relationship feels important enough to keep trying for. And when it keeps landing the same way, it can start to feel like you're failing at something you should be able to do. Like the problem is effort or skill or willingness. And that question can turn inward really fast. But if you zoom out slightly, a different picture starts to come into focus. What you're seeing is not a failure of effort. It's a pattern, a well-practiced, reliable pattern that both of your systems know how to run with very little conscious input. And every time it repeats, it doesn't just feel bad. It adds one more layer of expectation that this conversation goes badly. And once that expectation is strong enough, it starts shaping the experience before either of you has said a single word. So the reframe isn't, we need better words. It's, we need a different experience of each other in this conversation. Because clarity doesn't land in a moment where both people are braced. Insight doesn't shift much if it arrives in a system that's still in protection mode. That doesn't mean the conversation is impossible. It means forcing it through the familiar pattern may not get you where you're trying to go. Sometimes the most useful thing is simply noticing, are we in the version of this that never works? Not with blame, not with resignation. You don't want to stay there, just with enough awareness to stop finishing that script. Because the goal was never to stop having hard conversations. It was to stop having them in a way that guarantees the same outcome. If it keeps going the same way, it's probably not a clarity problem, it's a pattern. And patterns don't change through repetition. They change when something new is introduced into the loop. If you want the guided version of this work, my private audio series is linked in the show notes. You can start anytime. That's it for today's episode of Coupled With. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to hit subscribe so you never miss what's next. And if you found it helpful, please share it with a friend or leave a quick rating and review. It really helps more than you know. And if you're curious about how we might work together or want more resources to strengthen your relationship, head over to my website, www.drrachelorlick.com. You'll find free tools, podcast extras, and ways to go deeper. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.